Hey, so just to make a relatively quick video on the subject of cold calling. So basically, I'm talking here about companies who phone up random numbers. Well, they usually have a list based on, I guess, network providers, and they phone up to see if they can try to tempt you to buy a service or do a survey or something like this. I had another one today. And we're getting them pretty much every day. I've now gotten the habit of something answering the phone if it says unknown number or something like that. Just want to talk a little bit about this. In the UK, this is quite a big phenomenon, and I would say about 90% of people don't like it. Um, so I really think that companies need to really analyze to what extent this works. Um, One thing I would say though is that I regard myself as a pretty patient person, and that I try to be civil to people. So most of the time I don't lose my temper with this, but sometimes I do get a bit annoyed when they try to push it, and when I clearly say, look, I'm not interested, and they push it and push it. Other times I just hang up. Now the thing is, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a major problem because they're not forcing you to do anything, and you're not like for someone like me, I can read the situation, I can tell them to take the number off the list, I can hang up. But I am concerned about, for example, maybe older people, people who are a bit more impressionable. I'm not saying all older people are, by the way. I'm just saying that there may be people that they target that don't, aren't so savvy and cannot simply, you know, talk their way out of it and hang up or whatever. Um, so this is potentially a big problem. Um, I want to also say something else. A lot of people take it out on those who are calling themselves because naturally they're the first person who's talking. So the person in the call center, they're going to get the brunt, well, in fact, pretty much all of the abuse from people who are fed up of getting these calls. I I do try to reserve my frustration not with them, but with the companies themselves. And I think this is something that people need to consider. The people who are making those calls, they've got very little power. All they're doing is trying to do a difficult job. And in many cases, these are young people who are just trying to get by. So I really try to reserve my frustration not for them, but for those higher up. And I think people need to consider that in the end of the day, most of the people who are making these calls are just, many cases, young people who are just struggling to get by. They're doing a difficult job. They're trying to. So I really try to be open-minded about that because I haven't been in a call center, but I have been in jobs where I've had to sell something or promote something, and it is really not easy. So I try to be polite to them. The last guy who called, I said, look, I'm getting these calls every day. Please just take this number off your list or whatever. But like I say, I feel somewhat sorry for them because they have very limited power. They're basically told what to do. And you have to consider if they don't do it, they'll just get fired. So I think people should reserve the really, the backlash for the CEOs of these companies. Sometimes it's charities, quite often it's charities, but not always. Sometimes it is energy companies, or it could be a range of things. And obviously, have a very smart way of talking to try and coerce you into it. Must take a lot of energy. Very often the call centers aren't even in this country. They're from India or, they're on other parts of the world. So you can't simply write to an address and say, please stop this. So it isn't practical from that point of view. I really think that companies that use this need to evaluate to what extent this is working because I would suspect the vast majority of people do not like it. Um, and when it is persistent, I mean, I don't feel I'm harassed personally, but I do think that someone who would be a bit more vulnerable, it could feel like harassment. Um, for me, it's not really a big deal. It's a little bit annoying, but I can not answer the phone. I can tell them to. But that's another thing. Every time I say it, they don't seem to remove the numbers, so it is somewhat annoying. Anyway, let me know your thoughts about this. Um, One thing I would say though, I'm not stupid. I know that companies need to gauge public opinion. That's how they evaluate, for example, what products are working, etc. So I'm not completely against companies having some sort of market research, but they need to know what works and what doesn't. Um, I mean, there's different approaches. They get people in the street asking questions. They um, they can send out spam mail, for your letterbox, or they can make cold calls. All the three approaches, I think the street option is the best. And in Britain at the moment, there's a bit of a backlash against that. But when you consider the other approaches, then doing that in a public street, I think is the best option. For one thing, no one owns a public street. So I think the general public need to calm down a little bit because there's a huge backlash against this. Um, I mean, they say a lot of people say it's an invasion of personal space, but that is a public street, and they're not following you around. I know that for a fact because I've done that job, and you're not allowed to follow people around. You're meant to stay within a few meters radius. Some people are more pushy than others. I've made another video about this, about the backlash against chuggers, so-called. Again, I understand completely the public's frustration with that, but I think it's wrong to take it out on those low down. It's I think that's unfair because they're just trying to do a difficult job. If you have a problem with it, write to the CEO of whatever charity that is. Um, but people also need to consider that there's some circumstances there really is no other choice. Say, for example, it isn't just companies. If it's the time of a general election, I've got no problem with political parties phoning up and asking my opinion on a subject. In fact, I would welcome that. I personally have no problem with that because it's unfair to say, on one hand, politicians don't listen, and then when they're giving you an opportunity to voice your opinion, just saying, oh, I'm busy, leave me alone, whatever. You can't have it both ways. And I staunchly believe that in a democratic country, um, citizens also have responsibilities. So people cannot just blame politicians for everything and just say, oh, they're not listening, when they're giving you an opportunity to put forward your concerns, and then you're kind of turning your nose up at it and saying, it's a nuisance call or whatever. So in the case of political parties, I have no problem with that because politics changes lives. Um, I think it's more important than most other things. Charities, I'm somewhat sympathetic to, although again, I totally understand the backlash when the British are pretty generous people, and I do understand people getting angry when they feel they've been very generous with a charity, and it feels like that charity is kind of taking advantage of their generosity further by trying to get even more money out of them. I don't think they should do that. They kind of take the logic, oh, well, this person must be sympathetic to our cause, but they have to remember that not everyone can just throw away money, and in many cases, people support several charities at once. So they really need to evaluate that. Um, so yeah, in conclusion, I'm not saying that there should be no sort of market research or no sort of fundraising methods in the case of charities. Um, but I do think they need to consider what works, what doesn't. And a final thought, I know to my fellow citizens, I know it's annoying, but just remember that the person on the other end, they're low level. They're just trying to do a difficult job. So by all means, show frustration, but what I would do personally, I'm not telling other people what to do, but I think it's a little bit, that they cannot really defend themselves if you're yelling at them and they can't defend themselves. So I think it's a bit unfair to sort of yell at them directly. I know it's frustrating. What I would do is say, look, I know you're just doing your job, but please take my number off your list. So try to make it impersonal. Try to say, this is just my suggestion because I've had to put up with this a lot as well. So anyway, I really think companies need to reevaluate what works, what doesn't. I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts.